All right, here is the last section of Chapter 5, Section 5.3, which involves solving radical equations. So that means there's going to be roots and equations, and we're going to do similar to what we did last unit. Last unit we had a bunch of different ways to solve equations. Now we're just going to focus on how to deal with radicals. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve equations. So if you look at this work right here, we get the root by itself, we square both sides to get rid of the radical. It's the opposite of square rooting, so we square both sides. And we're going to do a couple here. We also should practice how to check if we're right, which is verifying if our answer is correct. And if you look here, once you get our answer, which is x equals 6, we're going to plug it back into the equation to check that it's right. And we can also graph it to see if we're right as well. So if you look at this graph, you see that our answer is 6. Does it cross the x-axis at 6? And yes, it does. And those are all directly related. So let's just try a question, and we'll see how it goes. So we have a radical equation because there's a radical within it. And the first thing we're going to always look for is what is the restriction on the variable. And that leads us back to you already know that the number underneath the root sign, which is called the radicand, must be greater than 0 or 0, assuming that the root index is even, or that it's an even root. So when I look at this question and I see what's underneath the radical symbol, it's 3y over 5. That has to be greater than or equal to 0. So when I times both sides by 5, I get still 0 on this side, and when I divide by 3, I still get 0 on this side. Y must be greater than or equal to 0 in this question. Now, with that in mind, let's go ahead and solve it. To solve it, we want to get the root by itself. So I am going to add 8 to both sides. Then to get rid of a squared, we square both sides. Whatever we do to one side, we must do to the other. The square root of anything squared is itself, and then it will equal 36. Multiply both sides by 5 and divide by 3. And we check, is 3 times 60 divided by 5 plus 8 equal to minus 2? Well, 3 times 60 is 180 divided by 5 is 36. The square root of 36 is 6. Yes, it works. And we could graph it if we want, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Another question, the same question again. We want to look at the restriction first. We take whatever's underneath the radical. Say that it has to be greater than or equal to 0. In this case, we will actually have an answer different than 0 when I subtract 3 and then divide by 2. That is our restriction. And then we want to go ahead and solve it here. I'm going to get the root by itself still, so I'm going to first subtract m from both sides. And there's a minus here. I could square the equation now, or I could divide by a minus. It really won't matter. Either way, that minus is going to turn into a positive. So the square root of negative squared is positive. The square root of a square, or the square of a square root is itself. And over here, we have to make sure we do FOIL. We have to do the multiplication correctly, which is the most common error that I'll see. And so we end up with an equation that takes us back to Chapter 4. How do we solve a quadratic equation? Well, we move everything to one side. And now you can factor if you want, or you could use the quadratic formula. I'm going to factor. Except that's not right. It's going to be m minus 3, because 3 times 13 is 33. And so I get two answers. I get 13, and I get 3, and then I again should do a check to see that those are right. Now I'll do one question with you when you get to class, and it's a little bit more complicated with 2 roots on either side. If you want to go ahead and start the assignment, I won't hold it against you, but we are going to take some class time to do it, and I'll be glad to help you as you work. Otherwise, that is the last section, and there's some problems involved and more details you have to sort out, but that's the basic gist, and I will see you then next class.